Montana Territory, June 1873, they said she would not last the season. The doctor in Bozeman had told her uncle plain as day her lungs are too weak. She is not made for frontier living. But Noelle Granger had not come to the wilds of Montana to prove something to a doctor. She had come because she had nowhere else to go. Her father died the winter before, her mother soon after. Consumption, same as what whispered through her own chest on cold mornings. With no siblings and no money left, her only kin was Uncle Aldous Granger, who ran a small horse ranch outside of Gallatin Gateway. He had taken her in with a long, suffering sigh and a shake of his head. "You will not last a month," he said. "Best you stay inside. I will have one of the boys fetch water when you need it." Noelle was 23. She had never ridden a horse, never held a firearm, never baked bread over an open flame. But she had also never backed down from being underestimated. And it was on the second Monday of June, while standing in the dust outside the barn with her skirts tucked into her boots and her sleeves rolled up to her elbows, that she met him, Jesse Lorne. He rode in with the sunrise behind him, one hand steady on the reins of a black mare, the other holding the lead of a jittery bay colt. Tall, lean, sun-browned, with an almost too serious look about him until he caught sight of her. He tipped his hat. "Ma'am," Noelle blinked. "You are not what I expected." Jesse dismounted easily. "You must be Miss Granger." "I am, and you are," Jesse Lorne. "Aldous said he needed another hand. I rode in from Red Lodge." Uncle Aldous came out just then, grumbling something about chores and not having time for small talk. He barely introduced Jesse before setting him to work. Noelle watched from the porch as Jesse moved through the barn with quiet confidence. He did not talk much, but his hands were sure, his movements smooth. He treated the horses like he understood them. She liked that. By the end of the first week, Jesse had fixed the broken fence, calmed the skittish colt, and chopped enough firewood to last through July. He had also, without fail, looked up from whatever he was doing whenever she walked by, not in the way most men did when they saw a woman. His eyes held curiosity, not judgment. On the 12th day, Noelle tried to carry a full bucket of water from the well and nearly collapsed halfway to the house. Her breath caught sharp, knees buckled. Before she hit the ground, Jesse was there. He caught the bucket with one hand and her elbow with the other. "You all right?" he asked, voice low. She nodded, shame burning. "I am fine." "You are not." I said, "I am fine." He did not argue. He just walked her back to the porch and set the bucket down gently by the steps. That night she sat at the edge of the porch, watching the sky turn orange over the hills. Jesse came by with a tin cup of tea. "Chamomile," he said. "Helps with breathing." She looked at him, surprised. "You made this." "My ma had the same trouble you do." "Taught me a few things." She accepted the cup. Their fingers brushed. She did not pull away. "Thank you." He sat down beside her, not too close but not far either. For a long while they just watched the wind run through the grass. "You do not talk much," she said. He gave a small shrug. "Most words are just noise. I pay more attention to what people do." She looked at him then, really looked. "And what have you seen me do? You keep trying, even when it hurts. I see that." Her throat went tight. No one had ever said that to her before. She looked down at the tea, then back at him. "Do you think I will make it?" she asked. Jesse turned to face her fully. "I think you are stronger than anyone gives you credit for." The days stretched long and hot. Jesse kept working, and Noelle started doing more than her uncle allowed. She fed the chickens, gathered eggs, helped mend the saddle blankets. Her cough never fully went away, but she learned how to rest before it got too bad. Jesse always noticed. He would hand her a cool cloth or sit beside her in the shade without a word. She started looking for him in the morning, feeling lighter when she saw him. She caught him watching her once when she was laughing with the ranch dog. He looked away fast, but the warmth in her chest stayed all day. Then came the fire. It started in the hills, dry lightning, a bad wind. By the time they saw the smoke from the ranch, it was already too close. Uncle Aldous shouted orders, hitching the wagon, grabbing what he could. "Noelle, go with him," Jesse said, leading the horses out of the barn. "What about you?" "I need to get the herd away from the trees." Go, but she did not go. She grabbed a wet cloth, tied it over her mouth, and followed him. The fire was faster than they expected. Flames jumped from one dry patch of grass to the next. Jesse got the horses moving, but one of the mares panicked, breaking away from the group. She bolted straight toward the burning ridge, and Noelle ran after her. "Noelle," Jesse shouted. She did not stop. The mare stumbled in a ditch, tangled. Noelle crawled through the smoke, coughing hard, eyes burning, and untied the reins from the brush. She barely got the horse turned back when Jesse reached her, eyes wild. "What were you thinking?" he yelled. "I was not letting her die." "You could have," he stopped, took a breath. "You could have died." They got the mare back together, led the herd down toward the creek. By the time the fire passed, the ranch was singed but standing. The house had smoke damage. The barn was half gone, but Jesse and Noelle were alive, and so were the horses. Later, when the sky turned black again and the stars came out, Jesse found her by the well, rinsing ash from her hair. "You scared the hell out of me," he said. She looked at him, tired but steady. "I am not made of glass." "No, you are not." He stepped closer, took her hand. She let him. "I meant what I said," he told her. "You are strong. I am still sick, I know, and I still see you." "All of you?" She blinked fast. For once she had no words. He leaned in then, slow, giving her time to pull away. She did not. Their lips met, soft at first, careful, then deeper. His hands cupped her face. Hers clutched the front of his shirt. It felt like the start of something real. And in that moment, with the ashes still falling and the smell of smoke in the air, Noelle knew she was not just surviving. She was living. And Jesse Lorne was the reason. The air held the sour tang of charred earth for days after the fire. Fence posts still smoked in places, and ash clung to the undersides of leaves like stubborn frost. Noelle moved slower than usual, her legs heavy, but she didn't complain, not when there was so much to salvage. Jesse worked from dawn until the last light left the ridge. Sleeves rolled to his elbows, arms darkened by soot. He didn't speak much during those hours, but when he caught her gaze across the field, something passed between them, quiet, steady, like the feel of a hand bracing your back when you're not sure you can stand. They shared small moments. He handed her a clean rag when her hands blackened from hauling broken boards. She left half an apple on the rail where he tied his mare. Neither said anything about it. It was enough. Late one evening, she found him in the barn's remains, crouched beside a shattered trough. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in a violet hush. "You should eat," she said. He didn't look up. "This place took a harder hit than I thought." Noelle stepped over a beam, careful of the nails. She didn't sit. Her skirts would catch on the scorched wood, but she stood beside him. "I found a ledger in the back room," she said. "Aldous kept notes on every sale. Last year was lean." Jesse ran a thumb along the edge of a charred plank. "I figured the fencing's been patched too many times. And half the tacks dry rotted." She watched him for a beat, then asked, "Why'd you come here, Jesse?" He stood, brushing off his hands. "Same reason most do. Needed a place to start again." "Start again from what?" He looked out across the field where the last of the smoke rose in thin threads. "I left a place that didn't need me. Folks there had long memories. I needed somewhere quieter." She didn't press. Instead, she said, "Aldous won't say it, but he's worried about the hay. The lower field barely grew this spring. If the topsoil's burned too deep, we'll have nothing for winter." He nodded once. "We'll figure something out. You always say that, because it's true." She tilted her head, studying him. "You keep fixing things that shouldn't be fixable." He turned to face her, voice even. "So do you?" That night they sat outside the bunkhouse. A new potbelly stove had been hauled in from town, and it clicked faintly as it cooled behind them. The moon was just a sliver, pale and sharp. "I used to think silence meant something was wrong," she said. "Growing up, if the house was quiet, it meant someone was sick or gone. Now I find I don't mind it." Jesse leaned back on his palms, eyes on the stars. "Silence lets you hear things other folks miss, wind through the cottonwoods, a horse shifting its weight. Someone breathing beside you." She looked at him then. Are you always this careful or just with me? He didn't answer right away. When he did, it was low. You move like something that's been dropped too many times. I don't want to be the one who breaks you. Noelle set her tea aside and stood, brushing her hands against her skirt. That's the thing, Jesse. You think I'm made of porcelain, but I'm not. I've cracked already. I just learned how to hold the pieces. He stood too, slower. Then maybe I've been looking at you wrong. No, she said. Maybe you've been looking at me too soft. They didn't speak again that night, but something shifted. He stopped hovering when she lifted a bucket. She stopped pretending she didn't see the way his fingers brushed the brim of his hat when she passed. The next morning, Aldous called them both into the kitchen. He laid out a list of what needed replacing: tools, nails, feed, and pushed a few coins across the table. That's all I've got, he said. Go into Gallatin, see what you can get. It was a full day's ride, so Jesse hitched the wagon. Noelle climbed up beside him, a scarf tied over her hair to keep the sun off. They didn't speak much on the road. The land rolled out wide and empty, the way Montana always did, and the silence between them had softened into something companionable. In town, they bartered for seed, a length of rope, and 2 sacks of oats. Money ran out fast. Jesse held back 1 tin of nails when the price proved too steep. As they left the mercantile, Noelle paused by the window. Inside, a battered fiddle rested on a shelf. The wood was pale where the varnish had worn through, but the strings looked strong. You play? Jesse asked. My father did, she said. He taught me a little. He studied her a moment. You miss him. She didn't look away from the fiddle. Every day. They didn't buy it, but when they got back to the ranch that night, Jesse handed her a bundle wrapped in burlap. Inside was a piece of cedar, roughly carved into a shape she recognized. A bridge, she said, running her thumb over the grain. From a fiddle, I'll help you build one, he said. We'll find scraps, make it sing again. Noelle blinked hard. Why are you doing this? He didn't hesitate. Because you keep showing up. And that's the kind of music I want near me. She didn't kiss him that night, but she held the cedar close as she fell asleep, and her dreams were warm. The next morning, she woke to the sound of hammering. Jesse was outside, rebuilding the chicken coop. The sun had barely risen, but he worked like a man with purpose. And for the first time since arriving, Noelle knew she wanted to stay. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because this place, this man had become something worth choosing. Mid-July brought heat that clung to the skin and made even the cottonwoods droop. The grass in the cleared fields stood brittle and sun-bleached, and the mornings began earlier just to outrun the worst of the sun. Jesse had taken to working shirtless in the afternoons, his back bronzed and scarred in places, the kind of marks that didn't come from ranching alone. Noelle noticed, but she said nothing. She respected the silence around old wounds. Instead, she focused on the work. The days had grown fuller, mending tack, boiling shirts stiff with smoke, ordering seed in town through a passing freighter. Her hands, once soft and pale, had taken on a weathered texture, nails short, knuckles browned. One morning, Jesse leaned against the porch rail, arms crossed loosely, watching her strip old nails from a plank. You're using the claw wrong, he said, his voice quiet but firm. If I'm doing it wrong, why's the nail coming out? He stepped down, took the hammer gently from her grasp and turned it in her hand. Angle it here, you'll save your wrist. She tried again. The nail gave easier this time. Still not sure I'm doing it right, she said. He crouched beside her, close enough she could feel the heat coming off him. You're learning, that's more than most. She didn't look at him right away. I used to think I'd marry a man who took care of everything. And now I'd rather stand beside someone who lets me figure it out. He didn't move, didn't speak. Just stayed near until the last nail was pulled. Later that week, a letter arrived on a passing cart from Bozeman. Noelle didn't recognize the handwriting, but she broke the seal with careful fingers. A neighbor from back east. A woman who had nursed her mother and remembered her as a girl too quiet for her own good. The letter offered condolences and an invitation if you tire of the frontier. My doors are open. There is work in my husband's office. Clean air, doctors. She folded the page once, then again, and tucked it behind the flour tin. That night, Jesse found her by the stream beyond the pasture. The water ran thin this time of year, but it was cool against her bare feet. She sat on a rock, skirt hiked above her knees, sleeves rolled. "I heard from someone," she said. "Back east. She offered me a place. Said I'd have better chances with doctors there." "Are you thinking of going?" She didn't answer right away. "I don't know." Jesse sat on the bank, not looking at her. "The land's hard here, and it won't stop being hard, I know. But I also know you don't flinch from it." She turned to him. "You wouldn't stop me." He met her gaze then. "I'd let you choose." The words caught her off guard. She stared at him, the stream chattering between them. "What if I don't want to leave, but I don't know how to stay either?" He reached down, picked up a flat stone, and sent it skimming across the water. "Then I'll wait with you while you figure it out." The next morning, she rose before the rooster crowed. Her chest ached from the dampness in the night air, but she braced herself against the doorframe and breathed through the pain. She pulled her shawl tighter and stepped outside. Jesse was already in the field, walking the fence line with a coil of wire over his shoulder. She watched him a while, then made her way to the barn. By midday, she'd constructed a rough frame for a feed box and was hammering in the final brace when Jesse appeared, wiping sweat from his brow. "You did that yourself?" "I did." He glanced over the work, then nodded once. "It'll hold." She reached for her canteen, sipped once. "I thought about that letter. And I don't want to be someone who runs when things get hard. I want to be someone who knows what she's worth, even if no one else sees it." Jesse leaned his weight against the nearest post. "I see it. I know." He moved then, stepped in close, and took the canteen from her hand. He didn't drink, just held it like passing it back would mean something. "I've been thinking too," he said. "About what comes next." She waited. "I've never had a place that felt like mine. Not really. Always someone else setting the rules. But when I look at you, I think maybe I could build something from the dust and not have to run from it." Her voice was steady. "Then stay, not just on the land with me." He didn't smile. He didn't need to. He nodded once, the kind of nod that said he'd already decided. She reached out then, and he came to her like it was the most natural thing in the world. Their foreheads touched, breath mingled. And for the first time in years, Noelle didn't feel like she was breaking apart. She felt like she was being put back together. Evening found them sitting side by side on the porch steps, her head resting on his shoulder, his hand covering hers. The sky was pink with the last of the light, and the land stretched quiet and bruised but recovering. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They had chosen each other, and that choice was enough. By August, the grass had browned into brittle stalks and the creek ran shallow along its banks, but the rhythm of the land had steadied. The fire had left its blackened trunks on the ridge, a stretch of fencing still missing, but Jesse and Noelle had patched what they could, and the rest waited patiently for cooler air and autumn rains. That morning, Jesse saddled his mare before the sun rose fully, the light just brushing the tops of the cottonwoods. Noelle leaned against the paddock gate, braid coiled under a scarf, arms crossed against the chill. He didn't need to ask if she was coming, she already had her boots on. "Hay auction's 5 miles south," he said, tightening the cinch. "Could be a long wait." "I can ride that far," she said. He held her gaze for a beat. "I know." They rode without speaking, the trail narrow and bordered by scrub. Heat came on quick, but the breeze off the hills kept it tolerable. When they reached the clearing, nearly a dozen wagons were already lined up, men standing in tight knots, hands on hips, brows drawn. Jesse dismounted and helped Noelle down. She didn't need the help, but she didn't shrug it off either. The auction was rough. Hay prices had climbed since the fire, and the ranchers were desperate. Jesse bid once, then again, but the third time a man from the Bitterroot Valley outpaced him. Noelle watched his jaw tighten. "We'll manage," she said under her breath. "We might not," he answered. She laid a hand on his forearm. "Then we find another way." They didn't win any bales. By midday, the wagon was still empty. Jesse didn't say much on the ride back. Noelle didn't press him. That evening, she found him behind the barn, sitting on the ground with his back against the wall, legs stretched out, hat in his lap. She lowered herself beside him, folding her skirt beneath her knees. "I saw you looking at the sorrel's leg this morning," she said, old injuries flaring up. "Might not make it through winter. You could trade him, but he's pulled more than he had to since the fire." She was quiet a long while, cicadas buzzed low in the brush. "Do you remember," she said cautiously, "when I collapsed that first week here?" He nodded. "I hated how small I felt, like I was something to be managed." "You never were." "I was, Jesse. But not with you. You waited. You never told me what I couldn't do, just stood nearby in case." He looked over at her, expression unreadable. She went on, "I don't want to be taken care of. I want to stand beside the man I love and carry what I can." The word hung there, love. She hadn't said it before, not aloud. He didn't flinch from it. "I know," he said. "I've felt it for a while now. I just didn't want to name it too early, didn't want to give it weight you weren't ready to carry." "I can carry it," she said. "I want to." He reached over, slid his fingers through hers, rough palm against her weathered one. His voice was steady. "Then we'll carry it together." The next morning, Jesse rode out to the southern edge of the property, where an old root cellar had caved in years back. Noelle followed on foot with a satchel of tools. They worked until midday, clearing the debris, propping up the sides with salvaged timber. It wasn't much, but it would hold feed, and Jesse had a plan to barter with a neighbor for seed hay, half the cut in exchange for labor. Back at the ranch, Aldous watched them from the porch, arms folded, saying nothing. That night, Jesse brought out a small tin box he kept tucked in the saddle trunk. Inside was a ring silver, plain, the band worn smooth at the edges. "My mother's," he said. Noelle looked at it, then at him. "I don't have much," he said, "but I'll work until I do. If you'll stay with me." She reached out, took the ring, and slid it on herself. It fit. "I already said yes," she whispered. They married under the cottonwood at the back of the pasture, where the ground was soft and the air smelled faintly of sage. Aldous said the words gruff and short, but his voice cracked when he handed Jesse her hand. They didn't have guests, just the land around them and the horses standing quiet behind the fence. Jesse kissed her gently, one hand in her hair, the other at the small of her back, and she leaned into him like she'd been waiting her whole life to do it. That night, they didn't light a lamp. They lay beneath the open window, moonlight drifting over them, and Jesse held her like he meant to keep her safe from every storm that might still come. Noelle didn't feel small anymore. She felt known. And for the first time, she didn't wonder if she would survive the season. She knew she would, because love steadfast, weathered, unspoken until it had made something new of her, something strong, something whole. The first frost came early that year. Not hard enough to kill the last of the squash vines outright, but enough to leave a silver cast over the pasture grass and turn the creek's edge stiff beneath a boot heel. Jesse rose before dawn with his coat pulled tight and checked the horses' water troughs, breaking the thin layer of ice with the back of his glove. Inside the house, Noelle stood at the stove, stirring cornmeal into a kettle with one hand while the other rested low across her waist. The baby hadn't made itself known with kicks just yet, but her body had already begun to shift, slow and sure. She didn't complain. She adjusted. Jesse stepped in, rubbing warmth back into his fingers. "Clover's moving slow," he said. "Could be she's carrying again." Noelle didn't look up. "You always say that when you want an excuse to turn her out early." He leaned against the doorframe. "She's earned it." "So have we," she answered, setting the spoon aside. "And we don't get to rest yet." After breakfast, Jesse hitched the wagon and loaded it with the last of the feed they'd bartered for in September. They were making the trip to deliver it to the McKinnons, whose eldest son had broken his leg in a fall and couldn't ride. Noelle didn't argue when Jesse insisted she stay behind this time. Her strength held steady most days, but the corners of her eyes had grown soft with fatigue. Before he left, she pressed a folded note into his coat pocket. "If you find that fiddle bridge you promised me," she said, "bring it back." He kissed her temple, lingering just long enough for her breath to catch in that quiet way it still did. The trip took most of the day. Jesse returned with a pair of gloves from the McKinnon girl who'd taken to stitching leather, and a small wrapped bundle tucked beside them. A piece of maple shaped and sanded, near enough to a bridge to pass. He found her sitting at the table, bent over a sheet of paper with a pencil in hand. "What's that?" he asked, unwrapping the wood and setting it beside her. "A list," she said. "Names I like." Jesse dragged a chair close and sat. "For the baby," she nodded. "I thought it might be time to talk about it." He let the names rest between them, reading them one by one. None of them were grand or borrowed from scripture. They were plain, strong, the kind that would hold up against wind and time. "Your father's name isn't here," he said. "I want this child to carry something new," she answered. "Not something borrowed from grief." He turned the page over, pulled the pencil from her fingers and wrote one name at the bottom. She looked down, then back up at him. "Colin," he nodded. "My brother. He died before I left Red Lodge. Never made it home from the timber camp." She didn't speak for a long moment, then she reached for his hand. "I'd like that," she whispered. Snow came before November's end. Not deep but steady. Enough to dust the roof and make the walk to the barn a careful one. Jesse cut more wood, stacked it high by the door. Noelle sewed by lamplight, her belly growing round beneath her apron. In the evenings they sat by the hearth. He sanded the fiddle back into shape, piece by piece. She read aloud from the only book they still had with both covers, intact, a volume of prairie sermons that had nothing to do with the way they lived, but soothed something in her, all the same. "You ever think," she asked one night, "about how things might have gone if I'd left when I had the chance?" He set the fiddle down. "I try not to." "Why? Because you didn't. And that's what matters." She leaned into him then, her hand resting over his heart. "You're not always easy," she murmured. "I wouldn't trust myself if I was." She laughed, low and tired, but happy. The birth came with the new year. Midwife from town arrived by sleigh, boots soaked through to her ankles, face ruddy from the cold. Jesse stayed outside most of the day, cutting more wood than they needed, pausing only to listen for sounds from the house. When the cry came sharp, small, strong, he dropped the axe and stood still for a long while. Inside, Noelle held their son against her chest, sweat cooling on her neck, hair damp and tangled. She looked up when Jesse entered. "Colin," she said. He crossed the room slowly, took a seat beside her and placed one hand on the child's back. "He's solid," Jesse said. "So am I," she answered. He kissed her then, not like it was the first time and not like it would be the last. Just sure. Just home. The weeks that followed settled into a new rhythm. Colin slept tucked beside the stove in a cradle Jesse carved from pine. Noelle's strength returned slowly but surely. Jesse rose early, fed the horses, and returned to find her rocking the baby, lips pressed to his hair. By spring, the pasture had begun to green again. Clover gave birth to a foal, legs too long for its own good. Jesse laughed an honest, unguarded sound Noelle had only heard a few times before. The fiddle, now whole, rested on the mantel. Jesse had yet to play it. Instead, he waited. One night, when the baby was quiet and the air warm enough to leave the window open, he handed it to Noelle. "I think it's time," he said. She hesitated, then tucked it beneath her chin and drew the bow across the strings. The sound was thin but true. Jesse leaned back, eyes half closed. "Keep going," he said. She did. Outside, the wind moved through the grass and the hills stood dark and familiar in the distance. Inside, a man and a woman sat at peace, their son asleep in the crook of a cradle, music carrying softly through the rafters. They had come through fire, through loss, through doubt. And now, together, they had everything they needed.